Hi, my name is Dr. Christine Harrington, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk with you about a very important subject matter, academic integrity. As you can see, what we'll be talking about in this presentation is really what is academic integrity and why does it matter so much. And you can see also that the work in this presentation is really built on the work of Belcher and Dupre. So with their permission, I was able to use some of their kind of background knowledge and create this presentation for you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. First, let's talk about the definition of academic integrity. Individuals who uphold academic integrity are honest and responsible when engaged in academic activities. This results in the creation of academic products that extend beyond prior contributions while giving proper credit to those whose ideas who shaped or influenced the current work, much as I'm doing here today. So now we're going to talk about cheating and plagiarism. And, these are obviously two of the biggest dishonest actions that students can really engage in. And sometimes students engage in these actions, not intentionally, but just not realizing that the action is not ethical and honest. So I want to make sure that you all understand what it means, to cheat or to plagiarize so that you can hopefully avoid these actions and engage in very honest and engage in academic integrity. So cheating basically is any kind of activity that's going to give you or any other student an unfair advantage. So it's a pretty broad definition. Let's take a closer look at it. So most of us probably understand that if you give either answers on a test, that is obviously cheating. And same thing with homework. So if you're doing someone else's homework for them, and it doesn't really matter whether you're the giver or the receiver, you're both engaging in dishonest action. So that's pretty important. So it goes from the very blatant, I'm going to copy someone else's work, to some of the other ones that are a little bit more trickier and maybe not quite as easy to see as being cheating, but yet still are. So another one that I think a lot of students don't realize is that if you talk about what's on a test with someone who has not taken that test yet, that is cheating, because think about it this way. That other student is now has an unfair advantage over you and your classmates that were in the class that already took that exam. So although many students do like to talk and support one another, and helping one another is certainly something that we want to encourage, you can't do so in a way that's going to give them an unfair advantage on the exam or test. Another example is sometimes students are, very gung-ho to work together, and actually faculty love for students to work collaboratively, and often will give them assignments where it might be a group project where you do need to work together. But if the assignment is an independent one where the professor is expecting you to work by yourself on the activity, then it is not acceptable to work with others, your classmates on that assignment. That would be considered cheating. Again, it might be an unfair advantage for you to have a support team of folks helping you with your task when a classmate of yours is having to do it all by himself or herself. And obviously bringing cheat sheets or crib notes are, I think we all know that those are not acceptable actions in any kind of environment, particularly a college environment. All right, now let's take a look at plagiarism. Plagiarism is whenever you take your own work, someone else's work, and you act as if it's your own work. It really is stealing intellectual property. So what we're talking about is that someone has created something, whether it's a concept, it's an idea, it's a paper, it's a solution, it's a image, and that work is their work. So if you're going to use part of that work, you need to definitely cite that and let folks know where you got the information from. So let's talk about some more specifics here. So the cut and paste is, again, the obvious one here. You know that if you take your name, take the name of the person who did the work off and put your name on, whether it's an entire paper or part of a paper, that is cheating. So you can't just copy and paste from the internet. You can't copy and paste from another person's work. You really can't even copy and paste from your own work, because that's called self-plagiarism. So you can't just take your own paper and use it in multiple classes either, unless a faculty member said it was okay to do so. So you don't want to cut and paste, really. You want to try to avoid that method. That's not going to lead to good outcomes usually. Another issue that has to do with plagiarism is when students aren't effectively paraphrasing. So sometimes students think that as long as I change a few words, in fact, you may even have been taught at some point along the way that if you change at least 3 words in a sentence, you're good to go. You can go ahead and claim it as a paraphrase sentence. Well, that is not actually the case. You can't just change a couple of words. There is no magical number. It's really more about making sure it's more yours than more theirs. And then the last issue on this slide, you can see, has to do with citation problems. So if you are using someone else's words directly, like exact words, you need to make sure you're using quotation marks, because that's the signal to the reader that those are not your words, they're someone else's words. And then obviously after the quotation marks, you need to provide the source of that information. Another time is that, sometimes you think that you don't need to put a citation if you paraphrase it. And sometimes students think only I have to do it if I'm actually quoting. Well, that's not actually the case. You really do need to cite the source even when it was someone else's idea. So, again, here in this presentation, I am using a lot of the concepts from Belter and Dupre. And if I am using a direct quote, you'll see quotations highlighted. So the idea here is that you want to make sure you know how to cite your sources, and you want to know how to paraphrase, and you certainly want to avoid the cut and paste method. So now that we know what it is, let's talk about why it's so important and why academic integrity matters. Well, obviously, if you're engaged in honest actions, you're going to be more likely to learn. And the whole point of you really being in college is for you to learn. It's not really about the grade so much as it is as what skills, knowledge, what additional, new skills are you going to walk away with when you leave college. And the learning is really critical. So if you engage in dishonest actions, you're going to learn less, and that is problematic. Another important issue is that obviously being ethical is very important in not only college, but also in your career and in life in general. No one really wants to be around a, unethical person, whether it's in a social arena or the world of work. So it's a very highly valued skill and kind of character component in life after college as well. And again, the values really do build character. So honesty is an important value that will be certainly helpful to you now and in the future. Of course, there are negative consequences of engaging in dishonest actions, and colleges are, pretty strict about this because they know how important it really is for students to engage in honest behaviors in order for the college to have a good reputation. So if you are caught engaging in some kind of dishonest actions, there are a variety of penalties. It may range from failing an assignment to failing the entire course, or even more seriously, you could have a code of conduct report filed and you could get suspended from college, and this could become a part of your permanent college transcript. So it's really important that you avoid those negative consequences. So now let's turn our attention to how do we make this happen? So what are some ways that we can avoid cheating? Well, you're already engaged in the first step, which is learning about what academic integrity is. Because again, as I mentioned before, sometimes students don't purposely engage in this dishonest actions. They just didn't realize that talking to someone about an exam was considered cheating. The other thing you want to do is you want to make sure you're familiar with your college policies, and not just the college policies as a whole, but also your professors' policies. So the syllabus is a good place to go to see, what am I allowed to do? Is this an independent project, or is this a collaborative project? Is it an open book test, or is it not an open book test? So you need to make sure that you know not only the policies, but also the professor expectations. As I said before, you want to really focus on learning, because students who are focused on learning are much less likely to cheat, because cheating doesn't get you to your goal. If your goal is to learn content, cheating's not going to help you. If you're only focused on getting an A, well, cheating might help you get the A if you don't get caught, but it's not going to really help you with learning the content and knowledge and skills that you're going to need when you move on into your career. And the other issue is that we want to, also try to encourage others to uphold academic integrity. Kind of having a culture where you're around others who don't think it's okay to cheat is going to also help you not engage in those negative actions as well. So you want to surround yourself by other students who share your value system. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about knowing what is expected of you. As I said before, you need to go to your syllabus to see what is the professor expecting of me. So one of the first things you're going to want to know is, what is the purpose of the learning task? Why did the professor assign this learning task? And in many cases, your professor will describe this in class. Sometimes it'll be also listed on the syllabus. And as another note here about working independently or with others, usually that is spelled out on the syllabus. If it is not spelled out, let's say there's just nothing about whether it should be independent or whether it's allowed to be collaborative, you should always assume that it's an independent activity unless your professor says otherwise. So again, a good way to clarify is to just reach out to the professor if you're not sure. If it sounds like something that it might be totally fine for you to work with another classmate on, then go ahead and ask, and they'll let you know. Your professor will let you know whether that is or is not acceptable. All right, so now let's focus a little bit more on the importance of learning and why this really helps us with reducing dishonest actions. So you want to think about, what is the point of this activity and how is it going to benefit me? So if it's an exam, for instance, well, learning the content that you need on that exam is really probably going to help you and serve you well in future classes that this might be a prerequisite for, or maybe learning skills that might be useful in the world of work when you're finished with college. So you don't want to really rob yourself from learning, because you want to make sure that you feel prepared for the next step. I always say to my students that if you want to be an educator, for instance, well, you certainly don't want to just get A's on your classes. You really need to know what to do in that classroom when you get there. You need to know how to create a lesson plan. You need to know how to effectively teach. So it's really the learning part that's most important. One of the reasons that students sometimes engage in dishonest actions is really due to stress and high pressure. So a good strategy is to really engage in effective time management. And I know that is a ongoing struggle for many of us. We're always kind of faced with so many different tasks, and there's just simply not enough time in the day. But if you plan ahead, you're less likely to cheat, because it seems to be that students who are under the pressure, especially of time, are more likely to engage in dishonest actions. So preparing ahead of time, studying a little bit every day is going to really help. And breaking giant assignments down into smaller, more manageable parts will also help you be less likely to engage in plagiarism. So by making your tasks more manageable and doing a little bit every day, you're going to be in a much better place in order to be able to complete the assignments without feeling the pressure to cheat. Now, although we did say before that you don't want to engage in collaborative work if it's supposed to be independent, there are many helpful resources on campus, and professors, of course, want you to utilize, the professor himself or herself is a great resource, tutors, librarians, so it's not cheating to go and access, resources, again, assuming that that's okay. If it is like a take-home exam or something and you're not supposed to seek help, then of course you're not going to do that. But if we're talking about a traditional paper or project, that's exactly the reason that tutors and librarians are there, is to help you with those significant learning experiences. Now, this is another important issue. Just because you engage in honest actions doesn't mean that everyone around you is going to do that. And it really is the responsibility of everyone on a college campus to uphold this value. So we need to kind of send this message that integrity matters to us. And by doing that, you really are going to increase the likelihood of people engaging in honest versus dishonest actions. If you recall, I said earlier that one of the good strategies is to really surround yourself with folks who share your value system. Well, you need to be pretty vocal about that, and that'll make it less likely for someone else to cheat. Research has shown that people are more likely to cheat when they think everyone else is cheating. So the power of the situation really does make a big difference, and you can make a difference by really upholding that academic integrity and telling others that this really does matter. All right, here are some tips to avoid plagiarism. So again, you're going to start by looking at the purpose of the task, and you want to plan ahead. So you need to really give yourself plenty of time for the task. As I said before, you're not going to start the paper or the project, a night or two before it's due. You really need to start well in advance, depending on how significant it is. It might be months in advance or at least weeks in advance. You also want to practice some skills such as paraphrasing. So this is an area where students sometimes struggle in not knowing exactly how much they're allowed to change. I'm going to give you one trick, and I think it works pretty well. What you might want to do is just actually close the book that you're, or the internet site or wherever it is that you're taking it before you actually take notes on it. That will increase the likelihood that you're putting your summary into words of the other person's work. So by practicing that paraphrasing skill, it really can help. So it's something that you don't want to copy, because copying is not going to help you paraphrase, but it's a way for you to take in the information. You read it, you digest it, you close the source of the material, and then try to capture it in your own words. And that's going to be really helpful. As you go along, one of the skills that's really going to help significantly is if you can track your resources. Really make sure you keep track of which sources you need to cite. And learn how to cite those. So there's many websites out there, and I'll show you a couple in a couple of minutes, some resources that you'll find useful too. And then, of course, reviewing your work before you're submitting it with just a double check and make sure you didn't unintentionally engage in any dishonest actions and forget to cite something. All right, so now if we go back to the purpose of the assignment, this is one of the issues that I think sometimes students struggle with is you need to remember that this is your assignment. So your professor is looking for a lot of you in this assignment. If they don't want to see a string of quotes. So even if you're quoting everything and you're citing it appropriately, Smith said this and Jones said that, and, Shaw said this and all these other folks said that, well, that's just not really your work, right? You want to be summarizing. You want to make sure that you're citing those other people's, the Smiths, the Jones, the Shaws, whoever it might be, but you want to talk about how they're shaping the work that you're creating. So the idea here is that the assignment is for you to make a contribution. If you remember, initially, it's really kind of for you to extend above and beyond what's already been written about, but you're using those prior works to kind of shape what you're doing. So as I just said, you don't want to use too many words or ideas of another person's. Sometimes students quote too much when they don't understand content because it's hard for them to really, paraphrase it. They just don't know how to do that. And that's a good signal for you to go and seek some extra help, because if you're not understanding the content, it is going to be very challenging for you to paraphrase that. But you don't want to really use too many quotes. In fact, sometimes you won't need any quotes at all. And if you do use a quote, you should really have a good rationale for why that quote is needed. And as I said before, you don't want to have note-taking happen when the book is open or when the website is open. So you close it, and that will help you significantly. All right, here is an example. This one was taken directly from the module that Dupre did, and you can see on the left-hand side, the not acceptable quote, the paraphrase is really only changing a few words in the sentence. It's not exactly the same sentence that's on the top, but it's not really that significantly different. Whereas on the right-hand side, you do see that this sentence has been changed in a much more significant way. So this is an acceptable version of paraphrasing, and then obviously the citation information would have to be included there as well. All right, so a great way to kind of track your sources are some electronic tools for that. You can also just, keep them in a good old-fashioned Word document or in your notebook. But doing this not only helps you with the in-text citations, it also makes it much easier for you to go ahead and do that reference list at the end. The other thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to make sure that you can keep a link between the content and the notes that you're taking and which source it came from. So one great strategy is if you're going to use note cards, and they could be electronic note cards, it can be, PowerPoint slides, it can be flashcards, it can be all different kinds of things. You want to make sure that you put the citation next to it so you know which one it is. And sometimes you might have two citations that are very similar, like perhaps the same author did two different studies on the same topic. So you want to make sure that you're providing yourself with enough of those details so you don't mix up those two sources. Because keeping track of citations is a great way for you to stay, on the honest side of the house and not engage in any plagiarism. All right, so why are these citations needed anyway, these in-text citations? Well, obviously it tells you where that idea came from, and it gives credit to that person for shaping the work that you're currently doing. And as a reader, I may want to go and see a little bit more about that. So, perhaps you're citing a pretty cool study that I want to know more about, and you only gave me a sentence or two about it. I want to go back to the original source. So by providing that citation, you're allowing the reader to go back to the original source and gather more detailed understanding of that content. Okay, so when do we need to cite? What do we need to cite? These are questions that we want to make sure that you fully understand. So basically, anytime you're using someone else's words directly, you're going to need the quotes and the citation, or their general ideas or work, you're also going to need to cite that. Even if it's paraphrase, you're going to have to cite that. So there's really only 2 times when you don't need to use a citation. The first one is when it's completely an idea and it's all your idea. So it's not an idea based on someone else's work, but it's really your own unique idea. And the other one is if it's common knowledge. So like George Washington being the first president would certainly be common knowledge. If you're not sure whether it's common knowledge or not, then cite it. It can't hurt to err on the side of, kind of including the citation versus excluding it. That way you're more likely to not make a mistake with plagiarism. Okay, so a lot of students realize that they need to cite the work when it's a paper, and they certainly hopefully understand that you have to do that in the body of the text as well as on the reference page. But it's also important to do it with presentations, and students often don't always put the citations on the presentations. You probably have noticed throughout this presentation I've had several different citations on the bottom, telling you where I've gotten some of that work from. So you want to make sure that you include the citation, and so you need to cite sources, not just work with words, but also images, graphics, media sources, etc. So there are several different types of citation methods or styles out there. APA, the American Psychological Association, and MLA, the Modern Language Association, are probably 2 of the most common approaches. They are a little different in the way in which they cite the sources, both in text and in the reference page. So you'll just need to make sure that you're using a style that is consistent with the expectations of your paper or project. So here are a couple of websites that you can just go ahead and click to if you'd like to find out a little bit more. And of course, you can also Google, to find some of the other information, or purchase one of the publications that are available to you as a student through these different associations to help you with the citation of your sources. Now, it's really important at the end, students get all excited when they're done with their project that they, don't always go back and do the review part. So you should be doing kind of big picture review, revisions, which is good, just good writing practice, etc. But then you want to also kind of do a, really kind of let me look closely at this in terms of plagiarism. And basically what I suggest to students is you want to kind of look at pretty much everything you wrote down. And if it doesn't have a citation, you want to make sure it's either your own idea or it's common knowledge. And then you also want to cross-check your in-text citations that will show up throughout your paper. Make sure that they're listed on your reference page, and vice versa. You should not have a reference listed on your reference page if you didn't actually use it in your paper. So you need to just kind of make sure all of that is consistent. So I hope that you found that helpful. Here is a list of references of the sources that I used to create this presentation, and I wish you all the best as you engage in academically honest actions.